On March 19th, 2011, we went to the Herbert Hoover Library-Museum that's in West Branch, Iowa. And for those of you unfamiliar with West Branch, it's also home to a Quaker school. Well, the museum is close to the downtown area, and they have a lot of different events. You can see the signboard here. Posted inside the door, just inside, is a really attractive wooden depiction with art and photos showing the life of President Herbert Hoover from boyhood through his career and on into his presidency. Before looking at the museum itself, we saw a nice documentary about his life. Although the documentary and the museum itself is really all about President Herbert Hoover, the documentary and museum end up really presenting a wide swath of history, American history as well as world history, because President Herbert Hoover, before he became president and during his presidency and afterward, traveled to numerous countries, over 30-some, around the world. The entrance to the inside of the museum has, as you saw on the right and left, some really interesting glass depictions. And just as you come in, you can see some photos, and then it's kind of a walk through the museum in chronological order. And for me, I thought it was interesting to see the movie first and then walk through the museum. You can do that in whatever order you want, but it gave me a context then to kind of take in everything that the museum had to offer. Here's a picture showing Herbert Hoover when he was doing mining operations. That was early on in his career. Herbert Hoover's wife, Lou Henry Hoover, was well represented in the museum and also in the documentary. Here she's shown next to a cannon. That's a reference to her courage during the wars that broke out in China when they were there. The European relief effort is just one of many programs that Herbert Hoover initiated and was well known for. It was interesting to see some of the history from the 1920s, and also in everyday life, some of the technology that was available at that time. You can see here an old iron and washing machine with a wringer. Herbert Hoover was an orphan at a young age, and that really had a big impact on his life. So he is credited for creating the Child's Bill of Rights, which you can see here, and if you need to pause the video, you can read that. But it was something that he was a champion for. He wanted to make sure that in cases where kids didn't have their parents, whether it was because of war or some other tragedy, that the government would step in or services somehow would be made available to support kids that were having a hard time. Radio was a big part of Herbert Hoover's life during his younger years, as well as during his presidency. One of his, I guess, better known accomplishments was the Herbert Hoover Dam, the Hoover Dam, and here's a display with some information about that. Prior to Herbert Hoover's time as President of the United States, he served in the government and was largely responsible for many of the standards that we all benefit from today, and whether that be standardized tools, bolts, nuts, etc., and automotive standards, standards in appliances, all kinds of things, and I'm just rattling off some examples, but the specifics were made available here in the museum, and I thought it was really interesting. I didn't know that part of Herbert Hoover's history. With my interest in sustainability, I was really interested to see this home with a cutaway showing a typical farm home from many years ago. And you'll notice a few elements here, like the clothes on the clothesline, zero electricity clothes drying, and a little hand pump for the water, so no electricity needed for pumping water. And the garden there that at a period of time was called a Victory Garden. But anyway, I like this small scale model house and found it very interesting. What you're seeing here is another scale model that I thought was really well done. You can see the detail here. Although Herbert Hoover won the presidential nomination with a wide margin, the Great Depression really turned the people against him, and so his popularity dropped, and that was expressed, of course, in journalism. You can see this cartoon here. Herbert Hoover was known as a strong advocate for conservation, and he's also known to have had a love for fishing, and presumably then being in the outdoors. Here's a depiction of him fishing, and you can see even the detail of the tackle boxes here. Perhaps those were originally his. This next room is a recreation of a hotel room where he lived in his later years.
He rose each morning at 7. Then planted himself at a desk in the living room depicted here, where he would work up to 10 hours a day on books, articles, government reports, and a vast correspondence with the American people. Here he met distinguished visitors, including Presidents Truman, Kennedy, and Nixon, and wide-eyed children from the boys' clubs of America. Late in the afternoon, Hoover interrupted his literary chores for a cocktail hour, known as the pause between the errors and trials of the day and hopes of the night.
A short distance away from the museum, we saw Herbert Hoover's boyhood home, and you can see that here. It's pretty much a one-room house, very tiny. Behind his humble home, there is a recreation of a blacksmith shop, and I thought that was kind of interesting to see the old tools that were used by blacksmiths, presumably in the late 1800s or early 1900s. Just beyond the blacksmith shop is a one-room schoolhouse, which was interesting because inside they maintained the old desks and the old chalkboards and teacher's desk, as you can see here. And that pretty much concluded our visit to the Herbert Hoover Museum and home. I hope you enjoyed the video. This video was edited and produced using iMovie on the iPhone 4.